everybody. Welcome back to the Pejpod and back to another episode of Summer in Hawaii, a series. So we really hope you've enjoyed listening to all of our episodes so far. If you haven't, please go check them out. If you're new here, my name is Pauline. I'm joined with Eugene and John. We're all wedding and portrait photographers from Canada and the US. How are you guys doing?
Hi.
Good.
Good.
Doing good.
So this episode is super exciting. Not only do we have one special guest, but we have two. We are really incredibly thankful to have both Taylor Jackson and Sam Hurd with us today. If for some reason you don't know who Taylor or Sam is, well, you're probably either living under a rock or maybe you're new in the industry. And so you're welcome for us introducing you to them. So these two really are pioneers in the wedding photography industry, not only as photographers, but as educators, mentors, creators, and they're really true craftsmen in their own individual way. Both Taylor and Sam have been, a huge inspiration to all of us, and so we're really grateful to have a chance to talk with them, to pick their brains, and just have this moment with them. So I may have mentioned before, but Taylor was really probably the first person I found on YouTube when I first started entering into this new world of weddings. And I honestly can't thank him enough. And I think you guys feel the same, right? You guys saw his videos pretty early on, and he was one of the first ones I really think on YouTube and in that space. And so I personally would have been so lost without him. As you guys know, weddings are such a different thing as a guest versus when you're actually working them. So his videos really helped me personally. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, it is the same way with me.
Yeah.
I think when we talked about our first weddings and stuff, I think I did mention this. When I shot my very first wedding, there was nothing like that. So it was very difficult. But as soon as he started making the videos, or when I found him, I think everything became a lot easier. Yeah.
And then for Sam Hurd, his creativity, his composition, the way he can really just manipulate the scene of, what could be a typical or generic picture of a couple, he just turns it upside down, literally sometimes.
Literally,
yeah. And it's just wild what he comes up with. He honestly never ceased to amaze me with what he can come up with in the most boring and unusual locations, next to a garbage can in an alleyway or whatever you can think of. He can make it look amazing. So I personally learned so much from him every time I got the opportunity to be in front of him and just watching him work. It's so fun to just watch him work every time. So yeah, we're very excited to have them both. In terms of what we're going to talk about, we did tease about this, a few episodes ago. And so AI have recently been really taken off in obviously social media, in the media in general. So whether that is within photography or not, I think a lot of people are aware of how AI has making an impact in both photography and just in general. Even my day job, I was told that they use ChatGPT and some stuff. So I'm like, what? It's just crazy. It's crazy. And so we were really excited to talk about AI with these two, especially because I don't know if you guys listening at home or you guys have watched any of their previous videos, are members of their Patreon or any of their courses, but you would have known that they have a lot of opinions about this topic. So yeah, we were really excited to pick their brains about this one.
I have to say, obviously, us three as people who are actually doing the podcast and people who actually were editing and then rewatching and everything, and I'm quite excited for everyone to watch this. So this is going to be exciting. That was such a good episode. But before we begin, because we're not going to come back after the episode, so anyone who's interested, you can find Taylor Jackson at Taylor Jackson YouTube. Just search Taylor Jackson on YouTube if you don't know Taylor Jackson. And also he has Taylor Jackson, I think it's taylorjacksoncourses.com. and you can see all the things that he offers in terms of he really doesn't have any secrets, like in terms of all the business practices, in terms of how he does things, and in terms of doing the hybrid videos and all that kind of stuff. It's all there. Facebook ads, that's something that I've been benefiting so much lately. With Sam Hurd, he has a YouTube channel as well. Although if you see it in this podcast, he will say that he doesn't really watch YouTube video. And then he has a big he uploads a lot on his Patreon. I'm on his Patreon thing as well. And the amount of content there is just amazing. So if you're someone new, or actually even you don't even have to be new. Even if you've been in the industry for 4 or 5 years, I think you'll be able to benefit so much from these two courses. So go and check them out. I think it's a good investment. So yeah, go and check them out. But yeah.
Okay, so yeah, without further ado, here's part 1 with Taylor Jackson and Sam Hurd.
Lovely to have Sam and Taylor here today. Yeah, pretty surreal to have have the two people that we quite look up to.
Yeah.
Well, actually, first of all, we want to thank Taylor for sort of with Focal bringing everything together. So that's how we kind of met in Banff. Yeah, so that's how everything started, and we continued on as a podcast, and this is where we are, I guess.
So you started this podcast in Banff?
Well, we didn't start it in Banff, but that's where we met.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And then when we got back, obviously John and I started working together, and then we literally just started talking about different things on a daily basis, and we're like, all the things that we're talking about is probably something that's very relatable to a lot of other photographers. So we thought, why don't we just make it a podcast? So that's how we started. And besides, I think one good thing that was that we're not a seasoned veterans like you guys. So I think
lots of grace.
when you guys when you guys do give out all these tips and recommendations, I think sometimes someone who is just starting out seemed very distant to them in terms of whether that's really reachable and whether that's possible to do. Mm-hmm. But I think for someone who's still we're in a process of kind of getting our foot in the ground in terms of trying to make a living out of it and things like that, I think there's somewhere that probably more people can relate to us.
Yeah.
So I thought that might be a pretty good way to. So we call it a photography chit chat. It's not supposed to be educational, but we thought it would be educational for this one. So originally, I think our intention was to have as 2 separate guests. So we had different topics, but we do have them together. So we have a perfect topic for that.
Yes. This topic, we were like, wait, who should we?
Yeah, we did struggle who to choose and everything. So I guess we'll jump straight into it.
What is the topic? I don't actually know.
The topic is the how AI is going to sort of
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So we kind of thought about doing this topic probably about 3-4 months ago, and we were and that's when we kind of started planning this sort of series with you guys. And it was probably best to do it with you guys than us giving kind of our opinions about about the AI side of things. So I'm not talking about just AI in terms of editing or calling or things like that, but in terms of even when it comes to autofocusing, auto selection on the Lightroom and Photoshop and things like that. All the things that's making it easy for photographers in general. Mm-hmm. I guess first of all, how do you think how easy is it compared to when you guys first started?
There's been some advancements.
A few.
Yeah, I think it's such a broad topic.
Yeah.
That I think that there's a lot of positives and there's definitely some negatives. I think the positives that we've seen so far when it comes to just editing, we've seen some massive advancements just in the past year and a little bit. That's really revolutionized my editing workflow for sure. It's been pretty crazy that you could have just if you took a year off, if you had a kid, you took a year off and you come back that the landscape for workflow is completely different, and it happened in such a fast period of time.
It's weird. It's like COVID was the great dividing line between like all these AI companies and whatnot, and then pre-AI companies. Maybe not in terms of AI in mirrorless cameras was always kind of a thing. One thing to keep in mind though is I think the term AI now is exactly where, what was it, like a year ago, the metaverse, and then it was blockchain. Before that, like there's always this like version of technology that surfaces as the buzzword that like every company pivots to just like be able to get investors and whatnot. AI is that term now, and it has been for a little while, but just before that was machine learning. And the reality is I'm pretty sure, and I don't know too much about the deep technical aspects of these technologies, but I think most of what we're actually seeing is machine learning stuff. It's just everybody's kind of moved on from that term because it's not as hip as it was. And things like autofocus in the camera, where it's like AI face detection, blah, blah, blah. It's actually machine learning. And that means somebody in the code has done the work of like identifying what a human face is in a huge variety of environments. AI though, where the difference is, as far as I understand it, it can take that as a starting point and learn for itself as an improvement, generally, hopefully, not always in the pro improvement direction. Sometimes it actually learns itself and it gets worse, but it kind of can create a feedback loop in and of itself of this data. Machine learning doesn't do that. It's just sort of manually tagged stuff that the machine has now learned what you want to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what you're saying is like machine learning is where like a coding people have to actually input the data,
They're labeling
more data in.
data sets of photos and such.
It's the greatest example is I don't know if you watch Silicon Valley, but they developed an app called Hot Dog Not Hot Dog, and all it does is identify. You take your phone out, you take a photo of a hot dog, and it'll tell you if it's a hot dog or not a hot dog. But all it does is reference all of the images of hot dogs that it knows are hot dogs, and it kind of plays it against it. So I just wanted to mention that app.
That's great. Thank you. I forgot how good that show was. But you know, these companies can take maybe what they started as like a manually labeled data set and then feed it into other AI tools that can start from there, and then generate a feedback loop from a very good, solid data set, depending on the quality of the tagging and all of that. Then once users actually start interacting with it, just like with ChatGPT, which had to come up and say that once in this podcast, even though it's everybody's talking about it all the time. You know, the user's data and input and asking for like clarifications and changes to the data set, that is completing that feedback loop of ChatGPT able to like develop and learn for itself what people are looking for better or for worse.
Okay.
Just to kind of define some differences. And like I said, with camera AI detection, that's kind of just a marketing buzzword, I'm pretty sure. You know, there's this ceiling. It's not learning for itself what kind of eye you like to focus on more often unless you physically tell it in the settings or something like that. I don't think.
It's programmed so
Yeah.
that it already knows.
So it won't improve until the next camera comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or firmware updates can improve it, but it's not going to be figuring out like, oh, this is what a human looks like now, and adapting itself necessarily.
Okay. Well, for as a reference of like in this podcast, we'll probably just call everything as AI, just to make it easier. So like, in my opinion, like probably like with all the AI stuff, probably it will be a lot easier for like sort of newer photographers to kind of get into the industry, just because it'll be easier to take the photos. They don't have to make that sort of quick decision when the lighting is bad, like you have to use the flash versus you can post it in the post process and or edit in the post process, and then maybe when they edit, they can be more consistent with it, even if there are different lighting and scenarios and things like that. So my thinking is probably like it's probably easy to get into the industry, but it's more difficult to make a living out of it because there'll be more competition in terms of sort of like mid, sort of lower like level.
Yeah, the learning curve is definitely going to be pretty flattened. That if you have enough to buy like a proper camera, like a newer mirrorless camera, a nice 50mm lens, and you're processing everything through AI, as long as you can understand good lighting and what that looks like and good posing, a lot of the technical is kind of going to melt away. I think that we also maybe have a little bit too much visibility on everything, and we know how to work with it. So maybe it's a little bit more challenging than that. But for the most part, you definitely have a massive leg up. Like when I started editing my wedding images, I had to go one by one in Photoshop because Lightroom didn't exist, and I didn't have a Mac, so I couldn't get aperture. And I would have to load up one image in Lightroom or in Photoshop, edit that one image, close that image, and hope that I kept consistency with the next one. And that was obviously a nightmare. So there have been some significant advancements since then. And this is just kind of like the next iteration. Like Lightroom was a game changer for a lot of photographers, and now this is kind of the next iteration of that.
So with that in mind, how would you guys, what is your advice for newer photographers to separate themselves and um, be able to rise up and be able to make a living with all of this competition?
I have some advice, but I don't think anybody's going to hear it.
The companies don't want to hear it,
Yeah.
but I think it's important.
The advice I would give, so there's something lost in, or actually, maybe I should start with what's gained through having to do one photo at a time in Photoshop as you're, back 12, 15 years ago. You learn a lot about light in your decision-making process when it takes such a manual, tedious approach to editing your photos. And I guess we can keep this into the editing realm for now. Maybe we can talk about culling later, but it applies to both. I often tell people, like, these are the tools I use for culling and editing. They're AI, like it's doing what I would have otherwise manually done anyway. This is wonderful. It frees up genuine time, but that's after years and years and years of manually doing these things. So I've built an intuitive sense of like, God, I do this every time that I'm shooting. I'm going to remember next time to go out and pay more attention to the light, the way that it hits someone's nose, or whatever the issue is. When you don't have that feedback for yourself, because you just run it all through an AI using a talent profile or whatever thing, your work's probably going to look pretty good, but it's going to actually take you, I think, a lot longer to figure out why in the moment, in the real physical world, as you're working, it's not looking the way that it should, or maybe as good as you envision it being able to. So my general advice is to embrace the tools, but slowly get a sense of how they work in a workflow efficiently and what they're capable of, but don't rely on them to make up for poor technique. Because at the end of the day, or at least for right now, maybe for the foreseeable future, you still have to be in a physical space with a camera to capture the source photo. And your positioning and sense of posing and light and all that intuitive sense of what's good versus bad you might see an end result photo and be like, that's good light. But to make that photo for yourself in the moment, that's a completely different skill set at the end of the day.
And I think it's also important, you've talked about this, that like, don't just hop right into all the AI tools. Like kick back and actually figure out your process and figure out what you like to create before just kind of allowing the AI to steer the complete direction of your business. And your editing and your style, because I think that it is important to find the pieces that you like. And I know we talk a lot about like that style seems like this thing that just like arrives to you overnight, but it's definitely a calculated effort of just collecting source material of stuff that you like and doing something that's kind of the average of all of that. And if you just allow AI to come in and you're just editing with someone else's profile, you're going to become kind of a less good version of them rather than your own thing.
And there's nothing wrong with that either as a starting point or a learning tool. Like I have my own presets and stuff like that, but I spent years buying other photographers' presets because you might see one aspect of what they do in their editing that you can borrow. And then you do that from another photographer, or you combine it with something you've already liked that you do. And then over time, you are your own style, exactly like what you said. If you lean into AI tools, and the temptation is there early on because everybody wants to ramp their business up, and once you realize kind of the shape of how the industry works, you're like, okay, this is what I want to do full time. I want to quit my job and go do this. It's actually way more beneficial to take the extra time to develop things on your own, and long term, having a unique style will actually benefit your business because you'll be much more differentiated at the end of the day.
So I guess it's nice to keep the keep the part-time jobs.
That's the great thing about
Yeah,
weddings.
John and I are still part-time.
Are you? Okay.
And we actually talked about this before. I haven't tried any of the AI stuff. So I'm following your advice.
Stay away.
Yeah. I'm old school.
Well, for me, when I first started, I don't know if like, I think it was like few months before AI started coming out, and I still didn't want to pay for it because I'm not making enough money for this to be paying like consistently. But now that I have some weddings and it gets to use, but I guess what it does for me is it really helps me with like having that baseline. I only use it for just like how you use it, like exposure, white balance mostly, and then I put in my own preset there and do my own editing. And then I still take time shaping the light, just like how Sam Hurd does it, like with the masking and everything. I like doing that, making the photo special.
Yeah, that's the fun part. It frees up time so that those photos, the balance you have to strike though is making sure you don't have a representation of your work that you show on social media and stuff where every photo that you love, you spend a lot more time making perfect, and then the rest of your photos in your gallery, you're like you got to make sure all the other stuff, even though you're not adding crazy colors and gradients and stuff like that, there is a baseline that is like still excellent that people love or good enough for most clients. Yeah.
So I guess that kind of like sort of like thought process in that is that, do you think because now more people can, there's a more, there's an opportunity that people can use using the AI, if they use it right, they can save that time, and maybe, do you think that it will be more important to know how to market themselves better than the actual photography side of skills?
You mean do they have more time to?
Well, because with the AI, if they know their styling and everything, then like they can edit quicker, and they can, even like AI blogging with like Focal, and with all that sort of things, like it will free up so much more time in terms of to get more clients and market themselves, meet, I don't know, network with vendors and all that sort of thing. So the business side of things will open up a lot more. So do you think people now, you think like photographers probably like nowadays probably require more of the business side of skills more of than ever before?
I think there's definitely going to be like a personal brand element that's going to be, it's already required, but I feel like it's going to be even more of a requirement. Depending on how the industry kind of responds, like we already obviously kind of work in a pretty saturated genre. And if that continues to become more saturated, then yes, there's going to be like a very specific person for each couple that's getting married. And the faster you can connect with them, the faster you're going to book those weddings. But maybe that means that you're not going to be shooting those like 80, 90 wedding, like crazy seasons, because you can't just book a wide spectrum of different types of work, that you're going to be attracting that very specific person. So I don't know if that's going to kind of narrow the industry, or maybe narrow the scope of some photographers and as they're creating their marketing material. I don't know. We'll find out that, I guess, together.
Yeah, I mean, you can take that time and spend it on like, anything really. It doesn't have to be marketing or business. I don't know exactly how to answer that, but the thing I observe is I'm often told I don't have a great perception of how I come across to anybody else because I'm the person that's like putting myself out there on social media and stuff like that. It's really hard to get a sense of things. But I'm often told that like, you're so busy, like you're constantly putting stuff out there. And I do all my own editing, podcast editing, everything you see on social media, I post myself, like I blog, I don't outsource anything except for these AI tools, if you want to call that outsourcing. Yeah. But I don't actually feel ever very overworked because everything is so systemized and patterned in a way that there's room for me to grow. I try not to be too rigid in how I structure things, which is exactly why I was so quick to embrace the AI tools when they came out and like their alpha versions. I was like on it to play. But but having a process that has been really deeply thought through, where you've eliminated as many points of friction as possible, opens up your ability to do more of whatever you need, more of whatever you want. And for me, that's always been like maintaining control over social media and places where my brand and my voice I believe are me. Like I just could never outsource that kind of stuff. Even the consistency of how often I post and market myself, I want that to come literally from me. Because you learn a lot in that. Like I literally only really try and blog on Thursdays because I know Thursdays, by the time Google has like cached everything up, or on Friday or however long it takes, for whatever reason, by Saturday, Sunday, I get a huge burst in inquiries versus if I blog on a Monday. And part of that is also, I think, because wedding couples, they're together on the weekend. That's when they do research for their wedding. They, they're together on the weekend. So that's when they start to research. And so I feel optimized to blog on Thursday. But I would never have that insight if I just outsourced that aspect of my marketing and business. Maybe I would outsource it to somebody that did know that and was really smart about it. But I would have to find somebody who was a photographer in my local market that has a history of doing weddings that would already have figured that out for themselves somehow. I'm not going to find that person.
I think the only person that I can probably find is probably Sam.
I'll
also to Sam.
Lots of time.
Have you ever outsourced before, or you just?
Yeah, I played around with all that. Outsourcing editing, outsourcing email. That was the worst idea ever. I have a very specific way that I do emails, and a lot of collaborative tools require things like Slack, and I just don't want to have another piece of software in my life that I need to pay attention to. It's like I don't want email. My phone is very locked down. I get notifications for virtually nothing, and so I proactively have to go to that app if I want to look at it, which I do an unhealthy amount. It's not like I'm great about being removed from my phone, but yeah.
So I guess just going through that, I guess. So you take all the inquiries and you talk to all your clients to book and everything as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
That
Yeah. All of that is entirely manual-ish. And then up until last year, I was outsourcing all my editing. I do hybrid photo videos at weddings, so I outsource all of my video editing. And most of my YouTube, probably like half of my YouTube stuff, I have a friend named Tyler that helps me out. And then other than that, I kind of do everything in-house mostly. And I think Sam and I are maybe similar in just like the fact that we like to come up with the most efficient process possible to get the thing done. And we'll spend like 5 years trying to refine that process so it's like the best process. So for a lot of that, I feel like there's like a weird internal game with making things more efficient. So it's like fun and interesting to me. So it keeps me involved, even if it's like kind of boring stuff like responding to emails. That it can get better. There's tools to help you. And it's also, I think, like when that's kind of the core of your business, I would say, is like once the booking finally comes in, how do you convert that to an actual sale? I feel like that's something that you can't really outsource unless you're maybe running a high volume studio and you have a studio manager for it. Or if you just want to play the character of like that I'm just such a high important photographer that I don't even respond to my own emails.
Right.
And there's probably value in that probably sets like a good perceived value, but I don't know, most of my couples are pretty normal, and I think it would be very strange for them to try to get in contact with me and to I know that maybe if like people discover me over YouTube, they think that I'm like more of a photographer than I am, but like I just shoot the regular weddings at home. And the people that hire me, maybe they see the vanity metric that some people follow me on the internet, but they're hiring me because I'm a wedding photographer, not because I'm some YouTube person. They want me to do the job that they're hiring me for, not the other stuff. So yeah.
Definitely nothing wrong with outsourcing. I mean, everybody's going to have different reasons for anything. I don't have kids. You don't have kids right now. Like having a child might be like, you just have to be aware, like a good reason to do it, but you just have to be aware of what the trade-offs might be now. Like some of the subtle client interactions, if you have somebody else take over for your bookings, actually starts turning away more clients than you anticipated because yeah, it's like this famous YouTuber and he's got 3 assistants to get through before we actually get to talk to him. And that's only on the wedding day. Like that would be experience a lot of your bread and butter clients, for lack of a better word.
Also so awkward to show up.
Yeah.
Like that first 10 minutes of interaction, that would be so strange. I need some lead up. I need to like at least have had a phone call with my couples. Otherwise it's a very strange. I don't know. I've done it enough that I could probably get by, but it's not an ideal workflow, I don't think.
But, things change if you start having a kid or a family or something, or some other aspect of your life becomes really busy, and you need some tools, like outsourcing can be a great option. Just be mindful of the trade-offs and how it might change things.
Yeah, no, that's pretty impressive because like I always thought you guys, I always see you guys contents like, it's always like there's new stuff coming out all the time. So I thought there has to be like you guys like outsource quite a lot of that in order for you to push out that much of information and contents out. So like I thought I was pretty efficient, but it's like probably nowhere near, right?
The other thing is, you kind of have to do what makes sense for your brain, or my whatever. I'm talking to myself now. This is bad. I'm having a psychotic break on a podcast. But like some things I do that are actually very inefficient, I do on purpose because I just do. For example, I purposely sharpen as a very last step all my photos and using a Photoshop action because I really like the sharpening. But that requires a manual process of exporting, whatever photos. This is for like social media and blog, not the full gallery. But if I have 10 images I want to share, I export it out of Lightroom with no sharpening. Then one by one, I open them in Photoshop and run this old action. It looks fine. There's nothing super magical about the sharpening that it does, but that manual process, being in a different app, manually running this action real quick, looking at it get smaller, just for me, I often will take just one of those photos and swap it out with another one that I realize is actually better. But that's just a weird thing. It's totally inefficient, but it actually helps me self-curate a little more, just being in a different app. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is it just kind of sort of like satisfaction in terms of like this is done now? It's like you can post it kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that helps too. That's why I don't like tools. Like if Lightroom had the ability to export and instantly post a carousel to Instagram, that is lovely in terms of friction. Like there's no friction. If you could do that, that'd be great. And generally I like tools like that. But for whatever reason, the dividing line between when I'm going to show something to everybody else and when it's in Lightroom, I really like a few barriers to entry that I've put in place thoughtfully on purpose, because I will make tweaks and changes before I finally hit publish.
So it's like a safety stop, like, okay.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's a great way to put it.
Because I see myself doing that as well, because I would upload it to Google Drive and then look at another screen, like my phone, and then, okay, is this...
For me, I like color check, like, because every monitor for me seems,
Yeah.
it looks different. So yeah, that's mine for sure.
The color check is annoying in terms of like all these True Tone and night mode stuff that Apple's enabled. Like I got my mom's phone the other day and she just keeps night mode on all the time. So everything's super yellow. I'm like, Mom, if I sent her a photo, I was like, oh my God, this looks awful. She doesn't have that perception because she always sees it in that color. But
Life looks better in a sunset, man.
so.
I guess it's just random question. So, do you guys tell your clients to view the photos in a certain like device or a certain like with the True Tone off or something like that? Do you ever guide them to do something like that?
I don't.
No, my delivery email does say something about because I use a templated response. I'll tweak it a touch, but generally the advice is to mark your favorites. If you know anybody else, I really loved working with you both. If you know anybody that would also need a photographer, please recommend me, something like that. And then when you look at don't look at these at work or separately. Look at these together when you're home and you have some time to do it. I think I even call out the fact that like, I know you want to immediately open this email and look at it wherever you are right now, but wait until you're together in one space. But I don't give any guidance about screen temperature or don't use your 65-inch Samsung with HDR and contrast at 7,000%.
Just looking at them on your Tesla screen. It's lovely images.
I mean, most people would notice anyways.
I think that's true. Yeah. The great equalizer is print. And if I ever get a client asking about color and stuff, like, which is rare, thankfully, but hey, these look way too blue. A lot of your stuff is warmer, whatever. I really tell them I can only edit for prints because that's the only thing we see in front of us that is the same. Yeah, it's just something to keep in mind. I don't have to tell clients that very often, but that's my justification in the back of my head if I feel self-conscious about seeing my photos somewhere else. Like I've visited some clients for family sessions and they'll have their wedding photos on a digital like slideshow display and they're like insanely blue. I'm like, this looks awful. thankfully I haven't ever had anybody ask to like edit for my. Can you edit relative to my crappy Walmart $20 display, please, so it looks great?
We're gonna mail you our picture frame.